Malvern books.
Our next reader is Gudjon Bergmann. He is a veteran nonfiction author and novelist. The meditating psychiatrist who tried to kill himself is his debut novel and was inspired by an acquaintance's suicide attempt more than 15 years ago. Bergmann was born and raised in Iceland, but moved to the U.S. in 2010 and became a U.S. citizen in 2013. He publishes a new short story on his website every Friday, so we'll have to look for that. Please join me in welcoming Gudjon.
So, very poetic, thank you.
Thank you.
So, as she said, this book, Meditating Psychiatrist Who Tried to Kill Himself, was inspired by an unfortunate event 15 years ago. I was telling Richard before that at the time I was helping a friend translate a book from English to Icelandic. And he got a call, a friend of his, acquaintance of mine, who had been meditating for a long time, who had written books on Buddhist meditation, had tried to commit suicide. And that experience, because I was very much into meditation, and that experience shook me to a degree to which I didn't realize until I thought about what to write about in my debut novel. And I thought, this has to be it, because this is the topic that I've struggled with the most over the years. Is how can something as peaceful as meditation lead someone to want to kill himself? And so I'm going to read from a chapter here in the book, chapter 6. So just a little bit about what's happened up until then. The book starts off with a phone call to a therapist named Robert Davis, and he's asked to come to an imagined Austin psychiatric hospital to consult, because there's a man there, Dr. Viggo Anderson, who has been meditating for 30 years and has tried to commit suicide. Now, on his website and LinkedIn profile, Robert Davis says that he's been meditating for 20 years, and that's why they're calling him. They're calling him because that's what it says on the website. But in reality, Robert has only been meditating for 5 years, regularly. So it doesn't have the depth of experience that is being called for. But he says yes to the call anyway. And in an attempt to connect with the patient, because the patient, Dr. Viggo Anderson, when he walks into the room, he's sitting there in a lotus pose, deep in meditation, and no matter what Robert says, he doesn't blink, he doesn't move, nothing happens. So he thinks to himself, okay, the only way that this guy's going to talk to me is if I try to meditate as well, and maybe, just maybe, he'll pick up on the energy and start talking to me. And that's when this chapter happens here. So they've been sitting in silence for about 45 minutes. Mr. Davis, an unfamiliar voice interrupted. I'm ready to talk now. Robert opened his eyes slowly. It was Dr. Anderson. Success! He was talking. Robert looked at his phone again. The time was now 10:21 a.m. He had been sitting still for 44 minutes. He was slightly disoriented, and his body felt lifeless. After stretching and taking a couple of deep breaths to revitalize himself, he looked up at Dr. Anderson, who still sat motionless on the bed. But now, his emerald green eyes were open, and he was smiling broadly. You haven't really been meditating for more than 20 years, have you? Dr. Anderson asked. Robert was startled by the question, although he was still trying to fully regain his awareness. He felt self-conscious, like someone had caught him in the nude. No, he answered in a low, hoarse voice, as if he didn't want the onlookers to hear what he said. His vocal cords were rusty, as if he had just woken up from a long night's sleep. You did well. You went deep. Thank you, Robert answered, still disoriented. It was true. He had seldom gone as deep into the meditative state. It was a definite breakthrough. He had pushed himself to the brink, taken a leap of faith, and broken through an internal barrier. During his nightly practice, he hardly ever pushed himself, never ventured into the deep, Rather, he was content with short moments of peace. "How did you know?" Robert asked, wondering both how Dr. Anderson knew that he hadn't been meditating consistently for 20 years and how he knew that Robert had gone deep into the meditative state. "No matter," Dr. Anderson answered in a pleasing voice, still smiling. "Why did you start meditating?" After being exposed for his lack of experience, Robert felt vulnerable. In a way, he couldn't help but entertain the idea that this man, who had recently attempted to commit suicide, was some sort of meditation master. Suicidal or not, Dr. Anderson was certainly able to enter deep states of altered consciousness. It was eerie, to say the least, and now Robert couldn't imagine telling him a lie. He felt as if Dr. Anderson could see right through him. "I started meditating because I quit drinking because I'm an alcoholic. It was something that was suggested in the 12-step program," he answered truthfully. "So, your reason was pain," Dr. Anderson replied calmly. "And you were looking for happiness, yes?" he added, sounding like he had both made a statement and asked a question at the same time. Robert knew that he was the one who was supposed to get Dr. Anderson to talk, not the other way around, but he felt compelled to respond. Maybe the doctor would reciprocate. "Yes and no," Robert answered, shifting in his chair, straightening his back, trying to somehow make himself appear a little more respectable, less vulnerable. "I just wanted to experience moments of peace, to quiet my mind, even if it was temporary. I was a mess, unable to control my thoughts or emotions. Meditation was one of the things that helped. It made me happier at times, but never completely happy. I mean, I never expected it to." There was a short pause. When Dr. Anderson didn't respond, Robert continued. "All in all, meditation has made me a little less irritated. I enjoy more moments of peace. I look at it as my reset button. My wife comments if I skip the practice for a few days, says that my fuse becomes shorter." Robert was about to dive into a more elaborate reverie and expose more of what meditation had done for him. It felt like a dam was about to break, just like what would happen with his clients when he asked open-ended questions and leaned back and said nothing. But he caught himself just in time and stopped. For a couple of minutes, Robert and Dr. Anderson just looked at each other and said nothing, like they were in a 5th grade staring contest. "I'm not sick," Dr. Anderson finally said in a firm, calm voice, his green eyes serene. "Is that why you wanted to meet with someone who could meditate, Dr. Anderson, to tell them that?" Robert hesitantly asked, considering himself lucky to finally get a question in edgewise. "How would you describe the state you were in a few minutes ago?" Dr. Anderson asked, without answering Robert's question. "As deep peace," Robert answered without thinking. "Was it real to you?" "Yes, the peace was real." "Which state would you consider reality? The state you are in now, or the state you were in before?" Dr. Anderson asked. It felt like the older man was looking straight into Robert's soul. "What do you mean?" Robert asked, sincerely confused. "This, here, right now, this is reality. The other state, meditation, that is an altered state of consciousness." "You're wrong about that, you know," Dr. Anderson replied calmly. "This, right here, us talking, sitting in this overlit room, a bunch of shrinks watching us through the tinted windows, this is the dream. The peace you felt before, that is reality. It is the I. It is the only part of existence that does not change, that cannot change, that will not change. You may not be ready to understand this quite yet, but if you continue meditating, you will." Looking at the clock on his phone, Robert realized that he had been in the room with Dr. Anderson for more than an hour. Knowing that his time was nearly up, he decided to go out on a limb, to push the envelope a little bit. "Well, if that's the end result, then I'm not sure if I want to continue meditating. How can you even think that this, our everyday waking consciousness, is a dream?" Robert asked probingly, hoping for a response. But instead, he got the rubber wall. Nothing. Maybe I need to create confrontation, Robert thought, his NLP training kicking in. What was it that they always said? When the record is spinning on the same track, scratch it. Do something unexpected, push their buttons, get them out of their comfort zone. Is that why you tried to kill yourself? Robert asked in an adversarial tone, breaking the one guideline given to him by Dr. Burns. Were you trying to fulfill an idealistic concept of everlasting peace? He paused for effect, then turned up the heat and went straight for what he thought was the soft spot. I mean, if that's why you did it, if that's why you tried to kill yourself, to be in some sort of eternal bliss, then you are just as delusional as the jihadists who commit suicide expecting to end in paradise with 40 virgins. Robert knew that this approach would likely be frowned upon by Dr. Burns and his staff, that it would probably disqualify him from further consultations, yet he felt vindicated, like he had broken through all the bullshit and spoken the truth, his truth. There was silence. Then, out of nowhere, Dr. Anderson began laughing. Not like a crazy person, but heartily, like he had just been told the funniest joke he had ever heard. The laugh was deep, sincere, and kept magnifying moment to moment, expanding, deepening, booming, becoming louder and louder. Dr. Anderson shook and rolled back and forth. Tears started rolling down his cheeks. Robert was astounded at first, shocked really, but after a while, the laughter began resonating. It was contagious and genuine. There was nothing funny about the situation, but Robert started giggling as well, and within a minute or so, both men were laughing hard. Tears were streaming down their cheeks. Their bodies shook, almost in rhythm. Then, Dr. Anderson stopped laughing as abruptly as he had begun and regained his smiling, calm composure. It took a moment for Robert to realize that he was now the only one laughing. He stopped with some effort and tried to act professionally, but he knew that he had blown it with the onlookers. He wouldn't be asked to come here again. With damp eyes, the two men looked at each other. Dr. Anderson, who was still sitting in lotus pose, leaned slightly forward and spoke in a slow, methodical tone, keeping eye contact with Robert the entire time. Know this, Mr. Davis. I am not crazy. I am not sane. I am not alive. I am not dead. I am not even the human being who you call Dr. Viggo Anderson. This, what you call reality, is just a collective dream. I was about to wake up from it permanently when I was yanked back into this temporal space. I did not try to kill myself. I tried to wake up. Dr. Anderson said these words with such depth, such sincerity, that even though Robert had heard some of it before and properly dismissed it as primitive philosophy, now, at this moment, with what he had just experienced, nothing he had ever heard before seemed as real. Could it be? Was the peace reality and everything else just a mirage? Robert shook his head. No, that can't be. The doctor continued. This mental hospital is not real. Reality is one, not many. It was my time to wake up, to make my transition. Your intervention is just temporary. My transition cannot be stopped. I will wake up from this dream and be in reality, be in peace. The same is true for you. You felt it before. Peace is reality. It is the unchanging I. The ever-changing sensory world is the illusion. It is the people who believe in that illusion who are really insane. The two men sat in silence, looking deeply into each other's eyes. The peace is reality. Everything else is a dream. Really? The door opened abruptly. Mr. Davis, Dr. Burns said as he entered the room, thank you for your help. Your session with Dr. Anderson is now over. So the rest of the book is Robert's quest for answers. He's pretty messed up with this one.